Hello, my name is Jay, and today I'm going to show you how to record a computer build, which is kind of an interesting situation. Maybe you're not a tech YouTuber, maybe you're somebody that's just a gamer that wants to kind of record the whole process in which you build your own computer and post it for your viewers to watch. That's kind of what I'm going to show you today, how I like to do my videos. I've done probably maybe about 10 or so builds, and I've recorded probably maybe about 6 or 7 of those. I do have a certain way I like doing things, and of course I'll kind of point out some of the important things that people like to watch when you're building a computer, and some of the things that are not so popular people don't really want to see when they're going and watching a computer build. Also, I'm going to also point out the important things that you make sure you say, because there's also important information that needs to be communicated, especially when people are watching for kind of the special build experience. So basically what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to show and go through all the different parts about what you should kind of do for each section of your video, and then how to make a good looking computer build video. So first off, I'm going to start off with just kind of talking about the beginning. So an intro of the video is kind of important because you need to communicate what you're doing, which if you're unfamiliar, that's kind of standard for every video, but you need to go through and communicate, hey, we're building a computer here and this is what we're building. A lot of people will just be like, yeah, I'm building a computer. We don't know what kind, like what's it for. People want to hear like the backstory, what's it for, how much did it cost, like what's the specs on it, how long did it take for you to work for this, a lot of the background story behind it. Now specs are most importantly because a lot of the viewers that are going to be watching these kind of videos are of course going to be people that are more tech oriented. No matter how big your audience is, no matter what kind of audience you have, it's mostly going to be the people that are the tech, or the people that are more into tech are going to be more watching these videos. So you're really trying to appeal to them. So like in the beginning of my videos, I built a couple computers for some friends, things like that. I'll usually start off with some kind of like funny intro with like, hey, this is really RGB, or this is really cool, and I'll do something kind of humorous. But I'll also go through and kind of then communicate, this is something I'm building for somebody, this costs so much money, has this specs, this is what it's for, and then I'll go through and get into kind of the build process. So usually people that are watching your build also would assume know how to build a computer. They're there for more of the experience of getting a computer built or watching a computer be built, and they like to see the whole process. Now people that maybe don't know how to build a computer might also watch these videos kind of to understand what's going on. How do I build a computer? How do I replicate this? So a lot of people will have that kind of circumstances and will like those certain things, and of course like to be able to see those in your videos. So another thing that I like to talk about, so when I'm going through and I'm talking about, for example, the computer that I'm building, and I have some hardware over here I can grab in a second. When I'm talking about computer builds, you usually want to kind of get some B-roll shots. If you're unfamiliar with what that is, that's basically like, this is B-roll, and this camera that I have right here would be what I'd call or that's A-roll, and this is what we call B-roll, sorry. And pretty much that is supposed to be, me talking with kind of the important main center idea, but this is supposed to be more of like, when you're doing pan shots, for example, you're showing off, this is all my fancy new hardware. This is all the fancy stuff that we're going to be showing off today. And that's what I want to kind of make sure I communicate, is that people really want to also get seeing. They want to see what you're going to be building with. They want to see what you have and what you're going to be, see the hands-on work, see all the video shots of all the different showcases of all the different ports and all the different parts and stuff that you have available. So I'm going to go run over here. And for example, we're going to show you off this motherboard. Now this is a really, I would say, not the most newest and definitely not the most powerful motherboard with I think it's got a CPU in it, the old i5. But it's a motherboard. And when you're going through, and this is just a slider, if you're unfamiliar with what that is, it's just for like kind of the same thing, showing off hardware. And so usually people will do this for other things when they're reviewing or things like that. But I like to do videos where I kind of showcase the hardware. So if I wanted to showcase this hardware, I could do some really nice side shots like this, where I could go through and be like, hey, and adjust this a little bit, and I could go through and be like, hey, this is the hardware that we're going to be using today. And you could say this is the motherboard, and you can do a close-up of the CPU as you go down through the whole list of your parts. And you usually want to do that right before you get into kind of like a time lapse. Now obviously the time lapse, or this part where you actually are building the computer, is kind of up to up to you. Really, I've done it multiple ways, and I have multiple ways in which I like to do it. Let me adjust this so I have this later when I need this. But basically, when you're building the computer, there's two kinds of people. There's the people that kind of know what's going on and they want to kind of just see it done quickly, so they can get to the benchmarking or some of the testing. And then there's also people that want to kind of see it done slowly, or the most important parts, and then time lapse in between. So for me, I like to stop the time lapse, or usually have everything time lapsed except the most important parts. And the most important parts, I would assume, is kind of some of the unboxings of the really expensive components like the CPU, the GPU, RAM. Everybody knows what RAM is, and all the other components aren't necessarily that important. Maybe if you have a new motherboard or a new CPU, then that's really something you should take a time out and hands-on, hey, this is the CPU I got. So for example, if I wanted to kind of do the most important part of putting the motherboard together, now this got RAM, CPU, cooler, all that on there, I'd really probably want to get a close-up of me putting the CPU in the socket, tighten everything down, and then there you go, that's the CPU installed. And that would be something I would necessarily have some nice commentary with. I'd be like, hey, so this is the CPU we have, we're putting it in now. Make sure you line up the triangles, some of the kind of basic important information that anybody that's watching this video should assume and also those people that don't know what they're doing now know, I guess. So that's kind of one of the important things. And then also unboxing the graphics cards. Yes, graphics cards are of course new, or sometimes new depending on what you're getting. Those are also the really expensive stuff, so just make sure you have that, at least putting that in there, and kind of either make sure it's very visible in the time lapse, or make sure that you just spend a good time talking about, hey, this is the graphics card, it's got this, kind of give more specs, because that's what people are really looking for. As for cooler and stuff, that's also a lot of messing around with stuff, and actually coolers, depending on which ones you have, really take a lot of time. Same with the wiring and the getting everything connected. That's definitely something I would do in time-lapsing or time-lapse, because it just gets really boring, especially when you're spending a lot of time with your hands over the the socket, trying to put the screws, the mounts, all that, braces, all that stuff on there. It's hard to see, and it looks really boring after about 20 minutes if you're messing with that. And I mean, I have some times where I have a new cooler or something, and I do take a good bit of time to get that on there. And so it's definitely either something where you cut it out so you just get the good stuff of putting the final cooler on there, or you just kind of time-lapse it really quickly so that it's not really visible. As I said, for the wiring though, the wiring is a really difficult part, because you want to get some of the important parts like plugging in the GPU, CPU, motherboard connectors, all that stuff, but there's a lot of hidden stuff that goes in behind the scenes, like cable management, where you have to get all the zip ties going, and that takes a little time messing and changing things up. And so I wouldn't recommend, having that whole thing play out in normal time, because I like to spend a good bit of time, maybe 30 minutes, on just cable management, because for me that's really what makes the build what it is. And so that's, for example, I would probably not do anything about, the whole back side of the case. I wouldn't really show that. So another thing we can also talk about, which we'll move over in a second, is I'll show you kind of some of the angles I like to do when I'm doing a computer build. So if you're unfamiliar, usually, I'm going to move this up here in a second. So usually when you're doing a computer build, you want to kind of have an overhead shot. So something that's kind of overhead, and I'm using my new toys, by the way. So something that's kind of overhead, kind of an overview of what you're doing. And so, for example, when you're putting in the CPU and hands-on stuff, maybe putting in the CPU this way, or you could have a different angle for maybe down here, where you have your putting in the CPU and all that stuff there. That's really what you should be doing for the motherboard. There shouldn't be too much different ways of doing that. Like, it's a motherboard, you should have kind of those similar, something along that line on the video. But when you get to the case and when you're putting parts in the case, there's a certain places that you really need to have the camera positioned. Otherwise, you're not really going to see much, and it's really difficult for people to kind of see what you're doing. So I'm going to get a case out real quick. I'll show you guys what that looks like. Put the case down and show you kind of hands-on where you should have the camera angled, what you should be recording, and then of course we'll move into kind of the final steps of the video, and then of course the end of the video. So when you're going through and you're doing a computer build, and you're putting all the parts in, usually when you're putting the motherboard in, which is kind of an important part obviously, usually want to have the case flat down on the side like this way, kind of like flat down like that, and then you want to have it lined up with the camera and kind of have a nice overview of what's going on. So for example, I could have the, if this is working in, have like a nice overview of, hey, this is what we're doing in the case, putting in the motherboard, and you could kind of have a nice view of that. Also, there goes the other case screw. Also, you could do a couple other things. So for example, when you're up and finally doing the cable management, you'd want to have kind of the case put up vertically and have the camera kind of where it is now. You'd have the case upwards, and you would kind of be able to see what I'm doing on the cable management wise on the front. Yeah, so for example, I'd have the nice little view of the case right now, and you'd see it's a little dusty. I apologize. This was only like $5, so I was good. But basically, you'd have like the whole cable management, you working on the cables, and this would be something the camera up front could visibly see, or over here. So next up, I usually also like to do kind of a showcase when the build's finally done. So for example, I'll be done with the whole video, and I'll kind of showcase how it looks, all the RGB or whatever features you have on there, make it look pretty, especially when I show off how nice the build looks. Also, you could throw a couple of those clips in the beginning, kind of show that, hey, we actually are building a computer, this wasn't clickbait, this looks really nice. And so that's kind of what you'd want to put up in the front as well. Next, I would also move into some benchmarking. People like to see benchmarks, and this can be really easy to be done because you just load up some of your favorite games and play a little bit. People really like to see a couple of the common ones currently, so Fortnite isn't really a good indicator, but for some reason people like to see it, so throw that up in there and play some Fortnite. Also, I'd say maybe go through and show a couple of the more challenging games. PUBG is one that's kind of really picky, so if you can play PUBG pretty nice, it's pretty good. And do some more benchmarking, and then finally I'd wrap up kind of the video, which is talking about, hey, this is what we did today's video. Talk about the specs, kind of talk about maybe where you got the computer from, parts, etc. Again, kind of a review, and then close up and thank people for watching, like I'm going to thank you all for watching in about 5 seconds. So yeah, I hope I was able to help you all with how to kind of set up a build video like that. If you're interested in Discord and want to contact me or get any help with that, I do have a Discord in the description for tech computer stuff if you're into that. And as always, thank you very much for watching. I got to use a little bit more of my toys that I have, some more stabilizers. I'll probably use that in a bit, and just do some different stuff. And I'm hopefully going to get some more computer builds up in my channel a little bit later. I like doing them a whole lot. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Hope I was able to help you out. And check my channel for other cool tech-related news, reviews, videos, builds, things like that of that nature. Bye.